Let's get hyped. Welcome in to another Husker247 HypeCast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson. We are Husker247, and this week's special guest for the Purdue game, a man who has watched Kyle Orton, a man who has watched Drew Brees, a man who thought he was going to see Drew Brees playing for his team in the early 2000s at one point in time. Renowned Dolphins fan, 93.7 The Ticket, salesman, and early break host Jake Sorensen joins us once again on the HypeCast. Jake, how does it feel knowing that the Dolphins almost signed Drew Brees, but then did?
Still hurts like 20 years later, apparently, because they haven't got it right at that position. We talked before the show that they have got Tim Boyle or Tyler Huntley starting this weekend's game against the Titans on Monday night. So I would take retired Drew Brees right now over either of those 10 times out of 10. So it still hurts.
How far could retired Drew Brees throw the ball to Tyreek Hill? 20 yards?
I'd say 20 to 25, and we could work with that right now. Probably accurate still, though, of course, more than Tim Boyle or Tyler Huntley would be able to do.
So it sounds like you're already hoping the Dolphins in a couple years are tanking for Dylan Raiola. Is that fair?
I take that. Yeah, I don't think you can believe in Tua long term. I know he could come back this year, but he's had several concussions now. The offense is revolving around him. If he's not quarterback, that team has no chance. Even if you bring a decent backup, they built the offense around him. I don't think that's sustainable in the NFL. So that's on Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer, the GM and head coach as well. But this will all melt down very quickly in Miami. It already is, and they will need to be on the hunt for a quarterback. So yeah, I'm all in on Dylan. Let's bring him to Miami. Let's get some Dolphins fans in Nebraska land, and they can all be in misery with me at the same time all together.
It sounds like you'd bring him in like right now.
I'd take him right now, BC. Yeah, let's start him. I think he's got an advantage over Tim Boyle and Tyler Hunt. I'll keep saying those names because they should make you laugh because it's so sad that's where they're at. Or a banged up Skylar Thompson who wouldn't start on any other team in the NFL or be on a roster besides the Miami Dolphins. So
this is great.
That's besides the point.
This is great.
If Tim
I wanted
Boyle
to get you worked up. Yeah.
If Tim Boyle were on this podcast right now with us, I wouldn't know who he was. I would have no idea.
I wouldn't either. I haven't seen.
Multi-year starter at UConn.
What was his stats there, Schaefer?
I don't have them pulled up in front of me, and my computer will shut down if I attempt to open another tab. So I'm not gonna risk that. He's terrible.
He's known for one thing. Last year on Black Friday against the Dolphins as the Jets quarterback, he threw the Hail Mary pick six to Javon Holland that 99 yards for a touchdown at halftime. That's what he's known for besides being horrible. So that's what we got going on. Things are great in Miami, and I'm jealous of the Vikings with their 3-0 start with our former head coach, Brian Flores, and Andrew Van Ginkel, who I told you Schaefer would tear it up for the Vikings and has through 3 games. Okay. And even the Broncos, I guess I'm envious you have a young quarterback that has a pulse, and Bo Nix. So everything's great over here. Everything's great.
These stats are too bad not to say. We're too far down this not to get the Tim Boyle stats out there.
Okay.
He threw 1 touchdown in his career at Connecticut in 24 games. 275 attempts, completed 133 of those. That's a 48.4% completion percentage. 1 touchdown to 13 interceptions. And Tim Boyle has played multiple games in the NFL, has been a backup now in the NFL, has made more money than any of us will in our lifetime. Tim Boyle, give it up for him. Just incredible. He's parlayed a UConn career in which he started 24 games and threw 1 touchdown into being an NFL backup. Just remarkable, really.
You guys are forgetting that he also spent a year at Eastern Kentucky in 2017 where he threw 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions.
Thank you. There we go.
Yep.
That one did not make the college sports reference college football stats page for Tim Boyle. So not sure why Eastern Kentucky didn't get the didn't get in on that, but so it is. All right. Nobody cares about Tim Boyle. Let's move on. We all care about Nebraska versus Purdue on Saturday, though some fans might care a little less now that Nebraska has a blemish next to their name. At 3-1, the Huskers coming off of a 31-24 overtime loss to Illinois on Friday. We will start, as we always do on the HypeCast, on offense. And we will start with our guest, Jake Sorensen. Jake, when you kind of go back and assess that Illinois game in your mind, Nebraska is very much able to move the ball through the air. They struggled to run the ball at times. Do you think they can have a similar game plan or similar statistics and win more games than obviously they lost on Friday with those numbers? Can they replicate that performance and have success going forward if things play out a little bit differently?
I think yes, but in this game, again, we all know that Purdue can't stop the run. They gave up 269 yards per game. They have back-to-back 300-plus yard outings against them. So if you're Nebraska, you got to prove to yourself you can run the football. I mean, they did the first couple games. They ran the ball well against UTEP in Colorado and decently against Northern Iowa, not great, but you have to prove that you can get Dowdell going and Ramir Johnson, Emmett Johnson, Gabe Irvin possibly. So, yes, I think this can be a pass-first team versus the run. But, again, this is an important week to establish the fact that with an experienced offensive line and experienced running backs, you can still run the football like these other teams have. So I have all the faith in the world in Dylan Raiola to continue to be a great quarterback and improve weekly. And, he's just been so sharp through 3 games. I would have no reason not to expect that through 4 games, he's been very sharp. But long answer short, yeah, they can with that philosophy, but you have to get the running game going more than they did against Illinois.
Bruntz, you are the resident tight ends guy on this podcast on Husker 24/7. You've often made your oddly specific predictions tight ends related. They've been pretty sleepy this year. Do you think this is an area that Nebraska can emphasize more, or do you think what we've seen so far from Thomas Fidone, from Nate Borkircher, obviously there was a pass to Luke Lindenmeyer last week on the 3rd and short that they didn't connect on. Do you think this is just where they are with the tight ends going forward?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's more room to get them involved. It feels like those are kind of easier throws that you can get for Dylan Raiola without having to really, press it down the field and put the ball in danger. I mean, I hesitate to say that that's it, but I mean, it feels like they need to get Fidone a little bit more involved in spots where it's conducive to him making bigger plays. I mean, we've seen less of the really short rollouts with him going towards the sidelines. I think if you can get a little bit more vertical with him, that'll help a lot, but I wouldn't close the book on that group yet. And I think too, you're going to have to start doing stuff to the tight ends because I think a lot of teams are going to start to follow the game plan that Illinois had where, even though Nebraska's shown that they can and are willing to try to back teams out of the box by throwing the ball, I think you just have to be able to mix in some intermediate stuff with that too. So I think there's still stuff out there for them, but I think a little bit more creativity in that area of the game would be okay.
BC, Nebraska's offensive line situation is a little bit in flux. We don't know quite the status of Micah Mazuka coming off of what is now a multi-game, benching for the lack of a better word. Gunnar Katula is now in at left tackle for Turner Corcoran, who is in for Teddy Prohaska. Where do you kind of see this offensive line? And is there a way that Donovan Raiola and Marcus Satterfield can kind of patch and pull this thing together that they can potentially be playing better football, I guess, if you will, moving forward, coming off of that Illinois game?
First off, I would guess Mazuka is back out there this week. I mean, he was on special teams, like on the O-line for that, but I have to think at this point, whatever the situation has played out enough where this is a big game for Nebraska. Like, people won't look at it that way, but you can't go there and play with their food in this kind of game. He could be an option at left tackle. That hasn't been thrown out the window. Tyler Knack could be an option there, and obviously Gunnar Gatula. So it'll be interesting to see how they line up with their front 5 in this game. They've kind of played it close to the vest with that, as they should. But yeah, this is a contest where you want to see up front Nebraska, get out and roll a team a little bit. Purdue has struggled against the run. I know those are different types of matchups. They've gone against teams that have better running quarterbacks or more of a threat than Nebraska brings to the table with that. Nonetheless, you heard Matt Rule this week say you've got to have that as part of your offense to go along with the passing game. Even if the passing game is efficient, you have to have those body blows that you're wearing out a team in the fourth quarter, sort of like Illinois did in Nebraska, I thought, in a lot of ways on Friday night. So I think that's a formula the Huskers need to really work on coming and having be part of what they're doing.
Brunts, BC touched on something that I'm curious about. Do you think we see a few more sub packages for Heinrich Haarberg on Saturday, given the nature of Purdue's struggles against rushing quarterbacks?
I think you have to entertain it. I mean, the rushing numbers that Purdue's given up are pretty gaudy, and I think a lot of it is, I've watched a little bit of Purdue football, which, that's neither here nor there. But I think that when they've given up a lot of yards, they've been very busty. Like a guy out of a gap, they can make splash plays, but when it's been bad, it's been really bad. And it feels like the option game or the quarterback run game, it kind of forces you to play more matchups and to have guys in the right spots. And I think, Nebraska probably needs to explore a series or two where you make Purdue do that. I mean, they were successful with it last year too. So I would expect it. I mean, it's interesting with Haarberg. Anytime he comes in the game, there's so much attention on him because it's a little bit of a different set, and that something's going on there with him. So I think Nebraska can kind of take advantage of that fact and maybe trick Purdue a little bit or create a chunk play off of something like that.
Jake, given that we're now 1/3 of the way in through the regular season, has there been a player or two on offense that has stood out to you either in a good way or a bad way as maybe surprising in terms of what their performance so far has been in 2024?
Well, I'm not surprised by Dylan. I just think it's amazing to me how a guy can come in right away and just feel like a veteran. I mean, I think I'm surprised with his execution level right off the bat. I thought he would have maybe a little bit of a couple first couple games that were tough, even though those are UTEP and Colorado, not the greatest teams. But he hasn't really had that moment of, wow, that's a freshman. Maybe in overtime, the couple sacks he took, but that was poor coverage, poor protection on the offensive line. I thought he's been impressive. But in terms of other guys, I mean, go before the season, we didn't say for sure that Dowdell would be the running back. We thought it could be Emmett Johnson or Ramir Johnson possibly, or maybe even Gabe Irvin. I'm not saying he's been amazing, Dowdell, but he's a guy that breaks tackles. He's someone that I think is a physical runner. I think he's a big factor for this game ahead against Purdue, and I think he could get a lot of carries in this game if they ride one running back. So I think he's a surprise in that factor. I think that I thought maybe I was wrong. I thought that it would be Banks, the top receiver, not Nayor, but it appears that Nayor's number one receiver, number two Banks. So I've been impressed with Nayor despite the interception that could have been a touchdown in the end zone against Illinois. So. And I guess even though it hasn't been a ton, I mean, we saw against Northern Iowa, Carter Nelson get involved earlier. I didn't think we'd see that much of him like in the first half of that game. I hope they see more of him going forward, but he's looked pretty good in his times, his catches. He's elusive. So I would say those three are surprise factors. I don't really have I guess disappointing. Like we mentioned with tight ends, you want to see more from Thomas Fidone. That's certainly on play calling, and I'm not sure if it's him not getting open or more play calling, but you thought he'd have a breakout season. We have not seen that yet. Season's still young, so it could be something that he can break out still. But I would say if one disappointment would be him just not getting the big numbers we thought he could be, or being more involved in the red zone for touchdowns there.
BT, to finish up on offense, and similar to kind of what I asked Sorensen, you're now 1/3 of the way through the season, but more specifically position-oriented. What do you make about where Nebraska's at running back? I mean, we've got quite a bit of evidence that Dante Dowdell is the guy that they like the most at that position. We've seen Ramir Johnson in certain situations where it's pass protection or catching out of the backfield would help. And then it seems like Emmett Johnson is probably the third guy in that mix. Do you think it stays like that the rest of the year, or do you think it could, we could get to the middle of October and Emmett Johnson has burst through as someone who's getting more run here?
I always expect a curveball when it comes to Nebraska's running backs of late. So I think at some point there's going to be some changing storyline there. I think Dowdell's played okay. I think he's gotten some tough yards, and there wasn't just a lot of space to roam the other night, and he fought for what he got. Emmett Johnson's the one guy who I always go back to, and I think every time he kind of touches the ball, it feels like he's got a good ratio of success. He'll make a big play. He's probably had more explosives than the other guys. And, I think it was the point Brunch was making earlier against a rushing defense in Purdue that's giving up, 269 yards on the ground per game. Emmett is a guy I think of this weekend as if he could pop out there, and you could envision him breaking a 35-yarder, and taking it to the house. And I see him maybe more so capable of that than the other guys. Of course, the sample size is pretty small on Dowdell. I think he's more that physical guy, but I'd like to see a little bit more of Emmett. And Matt Rule kind of hinted at that too, that he's one of those guys they'd like to work in there as this thing goes along.
Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball, an area that I think Friday left a lot of Nebraska fans feeling concerned about things. Brunch, do you share the sort of general sentiment that Nebraska's defense just didn't show up enough on Friday?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for a group that was supposed to be the strength of this team to kind of have the list of errors that happened in Illinois against Illinois. I mean, that's concerning. I mean, you're talking about basic assignments that were missed. The tackling was not good enough. You had a sequence where you let Illinois get, almost run for a first down on a quarterback draw on third down and then throw a touchdown to an offensive lineman. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we had not seen from Nebraska since that Michigan game last year. And it felt like, enough had been done that you would kind of you'd saged the defense enough, and the mistakes were out and things were going to be much better. And it's a veteran defense and all this other stuff. And that narrative did not play out in what was a pretty big game for Nebraska. So that's a concern. I mean, we're going to find out real quick here over the next couple of games, whether it's a trend or if it was a blip. And, from talking to the players and the coaches this week, they feel like it was a blip. We'll see. I mean, this is a Purdue team that doesn't do a ton offensively, but they can make you pay in the run game, especially if you're not in the right spots and you're not tackling well. So it's going to be a test. And we're going to see if Nebraska's learned anything from, kind of getting their nose rubbed in the dirt by Illinois.
Sorensen, as you sort of, listen to Brunch there, you go back to your own thoughts on the Illinois game or even the Northern Iowa one. Is it the sort of thing where you're going to need to see Nebraska put together multiple good weeks again defensively before you talk yourself back into maybe where you were post-Colorado?
Yeah, and the thing is, they did have 2 good weeks. I mean, the first 2 weeks UTEP, Colorado, they performed well. So we're not talking about a team through 4 weeks has had bad performances. It was just the last 2 that stood out, which was kind of odd after 2 really good weeks. So, and you don't really have a rash of injuries. I know Tommy Hill was day-to-day with the foot injury. We'll see if he plays against Purdue. But beyond that, Javin Wright was out before the season, and he hasn't played yet. But we knew that. We've seen Nebraska play without him, play pretty well. So, I don't know what happened in that game. Isaac Gifford said that they got punched in the mouth. I was surprised to hear that a little bit. Almost like they weren't ready for the physicality of Illinois, which knew that going in, that was a team that wants to, that is physical with Brett Bielema type offenses. So yeah, I would say this is a chance to hopefully get right. I don't want to say it's one of those get right games because it's a conference game, and Purdue has beaten Nebraska several times in the past few years, but as Brunch said, this team is lacking some playmakers. They don't, Hudson Card had a good first game. They have not been really good ever, since. Mockabee had a nice performance in terms of yards against Oregon State, but they got blown out. So Defensively, yeah, you want to make sure you stop Maccabee and don't let Hudson Card have the first game he had of the season. But I think that's very doable. And if they do that, it's doing it again against Rutgers the next week, who is again another very, very physical team. Can you be as physical as the teams you're going to play? You have to be in the Big Ten Conference.
Brian, if there was a bright spot from Friday night's game, for me personally, it would have been Sierra Wright stepping in for Tommy Hill and playing pretty well for a guy we hadn't seen on the field a ton through the first 3 weeks of the season. What did you make of Wright's performance? What have the coaches sort of said? And what do you think is kind of next for a really interesting transfer in from USC that started games throughout his career?
Well, Tony White and Sierra's teammates were really impressed with just his competitive spirit. Like, you saw it right away. He got tested on that third down throw. I think most of us thought it was a bad call. I don't want to get all into the officiating, but they called a PI on him. But Tony White said, give me more of that. Like, that's good coverage. Like, you know, you got a guy who's ready to go toe to toe when he's like on the receiver, like he was there. And then let's be real. If Nebraska wins that game, if Rila hits that throw to Lindenmeyer, we're writing sidebars all weekend about Sierra Wright on the forced turnover and the sack and all that. You know, I mean, that would have been like the play of the game. And so for him to come in a tight spot and do his part and honestly play with as much fire as anybody on that defense, it was impressive. And it gives you hope that, you know, Tommy Hill's injury worries me because it's one of those, like, you know, that feels like it could be nagging for a while. I hope it's not.
Linger.
But you guys know that one, when you get down and having a foot injury like that, it can be tough to get over in the middle of the season. So they might need Sierra Wright. They might need like Jeremiah Charles and Amari Sanders and some of these guys to step up. And the thing they're just going to have to keep showing is not only that they can cover, but that they can be physical in some of these Big Ten games where people are going to want to test their tackling and see what they're made of. So that's going to be like the next step to be really consistent with that part for a guy like Sierra Wright.
Sticking with BC, the buzzword coming out of that game, and you've used it a couple times. I think Jake and Brunts have used it too. Physicality, getting out physical, getting punched in the mouth. The way that Nebraska talked about things coming out of that Illinois game, do you foresee this week having been sort of Nebraska's coaching staff really challenging this defense to rise up after last Friday? I mean, the commentary from the coaches alone really seemed to indicate that they felt like the version of Nebraska that they know was nowhere to be found on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it goes back to, you got to find that energy, even though it's hard to do. That, like, they had it for Colorado. Rule said this. It's like when Colorado came here, it's like you knew Nebraska wanted that so bad. And you've got to build yourself up every week to getting close to that. And this past Friday, it felt like Illinois did to Nebraska what Nebraska did to Colorado, basically. Like, Illinois wanted it that bad, and it showed in the way they played. And so I think MJ Sherman was right when he said, you know, everybody gets all fired up, like bring in a motivational speaker and, you know, stuff like that people get excited about. That's not what this team needs. It doesn't need wholesale changes or any of that, but it just needs to, I really feel like, double down on their process and find that extra that they had a few weeks ago, that what it seemed to be, I guess, lacking in some ways against Illinois. And then tackling. For the first time the last couple of weeks, I've wondered about Nebraska's tackling a little bit. Like, that's about the first time in the Tony White era I've thought that, because that's something they could always hold up and be really strong with. So I hope that on Saturday we just see a team that is really strong and not letting those extra yards pile up, because there's been just too many leaks the last couple of weeks, I would say.
Sorensen, after kind of a strong game against Colorado, skews it a little bit. Nebraska's pass rush hasn't gotten home a lot, particularly up front. Is that a concern for you moving forward, or do you think teams have just been good about getting the ball out quickly as it relates to kind of where Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker and Jamari Butler and MJ Sherman sort of are with sacks?
It's a concern. I mean, your big play against Illinois was a cornerback blitz. So Wright gets him from behind to force the fumble. That was your big pass rush in that game. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened. They got so many sacks against Colorado, and they had, could have been long developing plays for Shedeur Sanders was caused that, but they still were mobbing that offensive line. I think that you just got to get fired up again. I mean, I know it's what does that mean when all is said and done? But this team knows they have talent. Those guys know they can get home to the quarterback, and it's just some sort of a tweak with their hand placement in terms of when they're rushing the passer. I think they know how to get there. So I think this team has good pass rushers. I think they'll get back on track, and Tony White and Terrence Knighton will work on that to get back on track there. But I mean, and as of right now, through the past two games, it has been a concern. And if you can't get pressure on the quarterback in this conference or any level of football, you're going to give up big plays. And so again, I have full belief in the staff and the players that they are capable of doing that. But again, opportunity arises this week against Purdue. Can you get in the backfield in a sleepy game? Can you get your own energy level for that? You're not going to have the crowd really making noise to get you jacked up for that. It's going to be on you. And can revenge for a bad loss get this team fired up? We'll see. But I would say it is a level of concern, but I believe they will find a way to get going there with the pass rush again.
Brunts, has the special teams been entirely fixed?
From when? From last Friday? I don't know.
For the last decade, I don't know. Just generic special teams question. Just go with it. I didn't have anything. I didn't really have it written out.
Generic special teams answer. I don't know. The kicking is a concern. That's my biggest concern is the place kicking. Like it sounds like it's going to be John Hull's job until it's not. And he's just going to have to make field goals. Like the thing that's tough is it's the inability to consistently make field goals is going to affect offense and decision-making and all that other stuff. And that's a concern when you're talking about playing one-score games and Nebraska's inability to win one-score games. Net punting is another stat that I think kind of bears watching as Nebraska gets into Big Ten play. Coming into this game, Nebraska is 113th in the country in net punting. And just a reminder that the special teams in the Big Ten is very, very good. And Purdue is 24th nationally and 6th in the country in net punting. That's the hidden yards. It's the things that you can pin an offense deep that help your defense. It's complementary football that's not happening. So are they fixed? No. Will they be fixed in 1 week? I don't think so, but you just got to find a way to get something out of. You got to get that group back to level. You got to get them back to even par because that's I think kind of what you're hoping for with that crew.
All right, it is prediction time. Oddly specific predictions. We're going to go to Brian Christopherson to start this one.
Okay, I will say Emmett Johnson, brought up earlier in this this pod, is going to score a touchdown of 30+ yards. I'll say it's 37 yards. Just rip through the hole. Was it against Purdue where he sealed the deal last year? So that kind of goes with that. It was about that distance too, but I'll say a 37-yarder by Emmett Johnson.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. Heinrich Harburg will have 2 total touchdowns on Saturday. He will have a rushing one that comes from 22 yards out. Nebraska lines up in a formation with Dylan Raiola out at wide receiver, Heinrich Harburg at quarterback. It'll be a quarterback blast. He will take that into the end zone, which I believe is a significantly longer run than he had against Purdue all of last year. They did a nice job shutting him down, kind of gave everybody else a blueprint for the month of November. Harburg will also throw a touchdown in this game as well, because Purdue will anticipate that yet again, when he comes onto the field, he is going to run at him. And this time he will fake the run, pop back, float it over to a tight end. That tight end will be Nate Borkircher for a touchdown. 2 touchdowns, Heinrich Harburg, 1 passing, 1 throwing. The backup quarterback has a nice day in West Lafayette. Jake Sorensen.
Similar to you, Schaefer, Heinrich Harburg will have a touchdown pass. It'll be on a play. He does not begin the play at quarterback. It'll be either in the backfield or a tight end type.
Sneaky.
But that touchdown pass will go to Dylan Raiola on an 11-yard pass in the red zone.
Trick play. If he can catch?
We're going to find out. Trick play, Heinrich Harburg not starting at quarterback in the play. Well, Dylan will be the quarterback, but he will go out in motion, and it'll be an 11-yard touchdown, Harburg to Raiola in the red zone, pandemonium in Lincoln.
Wouldn't the most Nebraska thing possibly be that Harburg throws it a little bit too hard and Dylan hurts his finger trying to catch the ball in this scenario?
Yep, that would be very Nebraska. We hope.
I don't know why you would even speak that out there.
Yeah, I apologize. Maybe I'll have to edit the podcast and take that out. We may not need that. We've run into this situation before. I apologize, Jake.
It's okay.
Brunts?
So Purdue comes into the game 128th in turnover margin. And do you know why that is?
They haven't had a takeaway this year.
They have not had a takeaway this year. I think I've got 2 takeaway specific, oddly specific predictions. I think Nebraska doesn't turn the ball over in this game. I think John Bullock's going to get an interception. And I think it's going to be Hudson Card forcing the ball to tight end Max Clare, who, by the way, is the only Purdue player with double-digit receptions this year. So he's going to force it. We've seen Purdue tight ends have their way with Nebraska in the past. John Bullock's playing with his hair on fire. He intercepts the ball on kind of a route up the seam and turns around it back for 11 yards. I don't know where it's going to happen on the field, but it's going to be an 11-yard return, and John Bullock strikes again.
I like it. All right, pick to click, Sorensen.
I know it seems pretty easy, just the fact that they ran the ball. Purdue can't stop the run, excuse me. I'm going to say Dante Dowdell. They get him going. I think you could see him get up to 18 carries. I know it seems like a lot. We haven't seen that 20 to 25 carry yet, but I think 18 carries for Dowdell, over 120-some yards,
Ooh.
A touchdown, potentially 2 touchdowns. But I think you see Nebraska, again, they see that they can't stop the run. They prove that you can run the football against a team that can't stop the run. I'm going to go Dowdell, 18 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown.
Brunt.
50 click.
I'm going to say I think it's going to be a John Bullock game. I'm going to stick with that trend. I love the way he's been playing. Purdue is going to try to run the ball at Nebraska and see if they can kind of follow the blueprint that Northern Iowa and Illinois had. Maccabee's a tough runner to get to the ground, but I think John Bullock leads a resurgent Nebraska defense in this game, and I think Bullock is going to finish with 9 tackles, that 1 interception that I already predicted, and 2 tackles for loss. Big game for the super senior.
BT.
I'm going to use this guy, as an example of the Husker defense as a whole. I think if you look at the first 4 games, Princewell has been close to a lot of stuff. He's flashed, he's come on the screen, he's hit the QB, he's had these moments where he just misses and things of that nature, and it just hasn't quite transpired like you want. Even the one where he sacked Shadur gets called back because James Williams was offside. So I think this is the game where he finishes the deal a couple of times and has a couple of sacks in this game. He's been very close to multiple sacks in a couple of games, and I'll say he does it this week.
One of the best defensive players for Nebraska last year was Isaac Gifford. I don't feel like he's been as noticeable this year. I think he has his best game of the season on Saturday against Purdue. Gets involved with some pass deflections, some run stops. And we'll even say that I don't know that he directly gets the takeaway, but he helps force a takeaway. Maybe tips a ball up in the air. Someone else is able to come down with it. But Isaac Gifford, I look for him to have a good game on Saturday as one of the leaders on Nebraska's defense. It's looking to get right against Purdue. All right, score prediction time. We've been close all year. Everyone has really been kind of within a 6-point either way. So this is the first game where I don't know where people are going to go with it. Are you predicting blowouts? Is it going to be close? Is it going to be sleepy in West Lafayette? Michael Brunch, you're a West Lafayette veteran. What do you think happens in Purdue?
It is going to be really sleepy in West Lafayette. And Nebraska's shown that they can lose games in sleepy West Lafayette. Let's not forget that. But I think Nebraska, I think the defense shows up for this one. I don't know that it's going to be a particularly pretty or thrilling game, but kind of a perfect game, really, if you're talking an 11 a.m. kick on Peacock. Like this is going to be the right place for this game. But I think Nebraska gets it done, 28-17 over Purdue. Some anxious moments in the second half, but I think Nebraska does enough to get back on the winning side.
BC, you're also a veteran of West Lafayette. You've ridden those golf carts from the parking lot through campus to the stadium. What are you anticipating for a score on Saturday?
First off, who was the Purdue running back the one year? It was against a Mike Riley team when it was 55-45 or whatever that score was. He carried, remember at the end to kind of seal it, there was a back who carried like the Huskers for like 20 yards.
Was it like King DeRue or something like that?
It was, yeah.
He was a long-time Purdue running back. I feel he was there for like 9 years. Like,
yeah, I mean that's kind of why he's the safest name to say. They had a Washington too. That was
it?
I can't think.
Was it Markel Jones?
Oh, that's another one. Yeah,
yeah. Should have been like a
David Blau in that game ran for 82 yards and a touchdown.
This was an impressive game. That's when I first became a fan of David Blau.
We've definitely seen some things there. Aiden O'Connell, before we even knew who he was, comes in off the bench and leads a drive, and it's like, how'd that happen? Then it turned out he was okay.
Was that pass was to Durham Smythe, right? Like he threw an absolute laser, like threaded it pretty well to Durham Smythe on like a big completion to kick that drive off.
Yeah, that was one of those classic, like, who the stink is this guy? How'd you let that happen? Then he turns out he's okay. He's all right player like a year later. But I'll say Nebraska 31-19, similar to Bruns's thinking on this one. It's one of those that's trying to like tease you into like with the spread at 10, and you look at like how Purdue lost 66-7 and be like, go old school Nebraska and think they're just going to handle them. There's a part of me that thinks that, but not right. I'm going to meet in the middle and say like the spread's about right on this.
We'll let Sorensen have the big finish. I have Nebraska 27, Purdue 9 on Saturday.
I have
what do you got?
A Nebraska win, but I have it being uncomfortable more than you guys do, I think, in your scores. Ooh. I think Nebraska 24-20. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that, but it proves you can win a close game against a team you should be winning more than that by. But it proves you can get that narrative out that you can win a close game. I think the environment is just going to be so dead that it's just going to, as Bruns said, this has happened before in West Lafayette. It has created some kind of odd games that have not gone Nebraska's way sometimes. So I don't think it's one you come away feeling that great about. Purdue shows some life, but I think Nebraska with Raiola just gets it done. 24-20, nervous game, but 4-1 is 4-1.
I feel like you'd have a lot of text line activity with the Breakers.
I think you
on
would.
Monday if it's 24-20.
Very possible.
All right, Jake Sorensen from 93.7 The Ticket. Appreciate you joining us here on the Husker 24/7 HypeCast. We invite you to like and subscribe our YouTube page. Please follow us. It's a good. We've got good stuff. We got the content coming up every week with the press conferences. We have all the shows that we do. You can get all of that on the YouTube page as well. Be sure to subscribe to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit the subscription. It'll be downloaded automatically for you should you choose to do that. And we invite you to visit us at Husker247.com. Plenty of coverage leading up to this Purdue game. Plenty of coverage coming out of it. Brunson, BC will be on location. One of them might even take a video of their golf cart ride. Maybe we'll get that on the site so you can feel like you too are part of West Lafayette at 7:30 in the morning when it couldn't be more fired up for football. Any final words? Brunson, BC, anything you want to add?
No, the only thing that's going to be getting me through that drive is the eventual golf cart drive as well. Everybody loves that. They've changed the route.
Purdue, Pete. Purdue, yeah. Pete, I'm in.
Yeah.
You got to visit the workshop. You were in the bowels of the stadium and you saw the workshop.
I've seen the heads.
We
There's
saw
many
like
heads.
Purdue Pete heads. That Brunston try to steal one and get arrested is probably the biggest upset of any road trip I've been on.
Yeah.
It looked like a dungeon, like a torture chamber. It was incredible. It fits all the thoughts that you would have where Purdue Pete dwells. So, all right, with that, we're Husker 24/7. Check out everything we got going on at Husker247.com. We'll be back with the post-game podcast on Saturday, the Sunday side session, all that and more with Husker 24/7.